We're going to start with him.
Okay.
Maybe everybody will come closer.
The live stream right behind you. You can actually just scooch over a little bit and you'll be fine. Yeah. Thank you so much. No, you're totally fine. It's very inconspicuous.
Yeah, just start. Okay.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Desmond Patton. I'm on faculty here at the School of Social Work, and it is my great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Reuben J. Miller. Dr. Miller is a member of the School of Social Science at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, and is currently an assistant professor in the School of Social Work at the University of Michigan, where we met as colleagues on faculty there. He is currently a faculty affiliated in the Department of African American Studies at Michigan as well, faculty associated in population studies in general. But in the fall, Dr. Miller will join the faculty at the School of Social Service Administration at the University of Chicago. We actually met 12 years ago. So he is going back home, which is very exciting. His research and writing and advocacy focuses on the lives of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people, and on how carceral expansion has transformed the social landscape. His research writing, as an interdisciplinary social scientist who works at the intersection of race and welfare, technology, human rights, law, public health, psychology, and social work, just to name a few. He's the co-editor of Reentry and Poverty in the United States, and two special editions of peer-reviewed journals, which we collaborate on together. He has done extensive field work in prisons in Belgrade and Catholic houses in Glasgow as well. Dr. Miller is launching a transnational archive of ethnographic study punishment in port cities for transplanted slave trade routes along with armed routes empire. So today, Dr. Miller will share findings from his ethnographic field work in Chicago and Detroit. This work is part of a book he's writing entitled Way Home. So without further ado, Dr. Miller.
Thank you so much. Desmond is my dear friend. This is my man. We hang out. We write together. Yeah, I just love him very much. Anyway, and so it's just another easy. I wanted to thank Geraldine, of course, and Claudia, who I haven't had a chance to meet yet, Nicole, to the Center for Justice, the folks at the Center for Population Studies for inviting and for hosting me. And so I'm going to talk today, as Desmond noted, from my work that took place in Chicago, Detroit, and some of it took place in New York City. I'm an ethnographer. I spent about 4.5 years studying, doing ethnographic field work in halfway houses in Chicago. I spent about 1.5 to 2 years following folks who got released from the jail, prison, detention center in Detroit. And in this last year, I've been doing in-depth interviews with formerly incarcerated activists in New York City and other places around the country. So I just wanted to give you that methodological note, and then we'll dive right in. And so what we'll talk about today, my agenda for today is for us to rethink the scale and consequence of carceral expansion. And to do this, we have to center and really redefine prisoner reentry. We have to break it out of the, quote, crime and punishment poke, as sociologist Louis Marquand tells us. We'll examine the work of reentry in the lives of the black and brown poor, and particularly in the lives of the black poor. And I'm going to make a few claims over the course of this talk, and the field work, I hope, demonstrates this. First, that reentry is not invented as a social institution. Second, that reentry makes up a new humankind, that the ex-offender is a new humankind, a new social category that has emerged in the carceral age. And the third is that law and policy and the practices of crime control from this new carceral age has produced ultimately an alternate form of citizenship, which should raise questions for everyone in the room about American democracy and what it means to be a citizen in the United States for any of us within an alternate citizenship track. So my argument is simple. Prison reentry is not just an event or a process. It is, in fact, a social institution, meaning it has rules, roles, recursive practices that get embodied as identities, and beyond that, long-standing social processes that an appreciable segment of the population has come to experience. That reentry, the social institution, has changed the nature of social interaction and has gotten into the texture of our relationships, especially in transforming the nature of relationships among the black poor. And law, policy, and our practice of crime control have inaugurated this new form of citizenship that I call carceral citizenship, that has alternate rights, alternate restrictions. But citizenship is not just about law. It's not just about legal standing even. Citizenship is also an experience. And so we'll talk about that. But to begin, we'll start with my favorite social theorist, James Baldwin. In 1965, he gives a talk at the Cambridge Debate Club, the Cambridge Debate Society in 1965. He says, it comes as a great surprise that the country to which you owe your life and your identity has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you. You're having a terrible time, he says. By the time you're 30, you've been to a certain kind of mill. He says, the police officer, the landlord, the landlady, the Western Union service clerk, and not just the, quote, bloody catalog of oppression of which we're all too familiar already. This is James Baldwin. It's the millions of details, 24 hours out of every day, which spell out to you that you are a worthless human being. And what's worse, nothing you do, and it seems that nothing that you quite possibly can do, will save your son or your daughter from the same fate and quite possibly coming to the same end. James Baldwin. So my work examines the mill. As I mentioned, I've been fortunate to publish with my dear friend Desmond Patton. We have a paper called Baldwin's Mill that takes up this very, I'm drawing from his debate that we analyze in this Journal of Humanity and Society. But I study this mill, and I think prisoner reentry operates in such a way. It is the millions of details, 24 hours out of every day, which spell out to you that you are, in fact, a worthless human being. And so why prisoner reentry? This is because reentry occurs across multiple sites. It involves multiple, largely unaccounted for actors. And reentry, as I've said, has transformed the social landscape, and with it, urban sociality, giving rise to new social forms. So a lot of the literature focuses on notions of social control, and I'm very interested in that. I think that our carceral state constrains social actors, and it disciplines them in such a way that it introduces new kinds of norms, but it's the introduction of new things that I'm particularly interested in. It is the new social forms that emerge in the face of such forms of social control that catch my fancy. But despite this, despite these largely unaccounted for actors, prisons and police get all the attention. And this is for good reason, but we'll come back to this point. I'd like to use my additional favorite theorist. Yeah, she's not my second favorite theorist, Nina Simone, who performed in 1962 this beautiful song, Cinnamon, at the Village Gate nightclub. And so the song asks, you all may be familiar with this song, but it asks a few questions. The song says, Cinnamon, where are you going to run to avoid judgment on that day? So the Cinnamon runs to the rock, he runs to the river, he runs to the sea and asks for help. So he runs to the river's boiling. He runs to the sea is bleeding. He runs to the rock, he asks the rock for help. The rock says, I ain't going to hide you, God. So the Cinnamon says to the rock, he says, what's the matter with you, rock? Can't you see I need you, rock? He goes to the Lord. The Lord says, go to the devil. He responds in protest, asking the Lord, don't you see me praying? The Lord says, where were you when you should have been praying? Go to the devil. He gets to the devil, and the devil is waiting. The Cinnamon calls out power. Now, in this parable constructed from the traditions of the black church, the Cinnamon knows that the devil will never be satisfied with his torment. That is, no amount of violence inflicted on his body, on the body of the accused, that is, will be enough. His cry of power, then, is not an act of worship, but an acknowledgement of a social fact. The fate of the Cinnamon is in the devil's hands. I use this scene to discuss the social situation of formerly incarcerated people who find themselves constantly at the mercy of others. There are few, if any, open doors in the labor market, in the housing market, or even within their families. Their punishment is lifelong. It never ends, beginning at the moment they admit that they are legally guilty. Just like the Cinnamon's confession of power, the admission of legal guilt is brought about through rejection and exclusion. For the Cinnamon, the river boils, the sea bleeds, and the rock says he will not help you. God rejects the Cinnamon even. While social service agencies have waiting lists, affordable housing is often scarce, and employers, landlords, and their family members tell them that they can't stay here. I ain't gonna hide you, God. There's no place for you. And much like in Simone's prophetic lyrics, the confession does not absolve the Cinnamon from their sins. It is the confession of sin, the plea bargain, the acceptance of guilt, at least the verbal acceptance of guilt. Is in fact a kind of digital scarlet letter marking the criminal for life and sentencing them to punishment for a lifetime. Hence Simone's lyric that the devil is waiting. Why is this important? Why focus on the reentry process with family and friends, social service providers, networks of agents of care who ostensibly should be the ones that are the helpers, and not what happens inside actually existing jails and prisons? My book will take on what happens inside jails and prisons in some ways to lead into what happens on the outside. And there's a reason for this focus, and the reason is simple. Here's a bar chart of the current number of folks who are in prison. Somewhere around 2.2 million people are right now on any given day in a jail or prison. But if we compare this to the number of people who are on probation or parole, we see that twice as many, more than twice as many, 4.7 million people on probation or parole. But to understand this problem, we have to shift our unit of analysis. Not to think about a point in time count, how many people are in a place on any given day. But what about the number of folks who make it through or pass through an institution on any given day? 12 million people a year are processed through county jails. We see from headlines in Milwaukee where a man died of thirst. But even this number is dwarfed by the number of folks who have a felony conviction. 19.8 million people are estimated to have a felony conviction in the United States. A third of this population is black. This represents a full third of all black men have a felony record. And of course, it's a Center for Justice Studies, so we think about criminal records more broadly. 79 million Americans, using a conservative estimate from the Bureau of Justice Statistics in 2014 to not count twice. 79 million Americans with a criminal record. So community, I said, is where the action is. It's where the center man goes. It's where he can, and he or she, he and she and they cannot find refuge. So we have to rethink what we talk about when we say a revolving door. This 2014 Bureau of Justice Statistics report followed 400,000 prisoners who got released. Some folks in the room, many folks in the room may be familiar with this. This is the largest recidivism study to date. Came out in 2014, found a 77% recidivism rate at the end of about 5 years, meaning close to 80% of folks who were released from prison in this sample, which is more than representative, 400,000 people, it's more than representative, were back in prison in about, I'm not sorry, back in prison, were rearrested within 5 years. Half of them were rearrested within the first year. A third of them were rearrested within the first 6 months. But what's striking to me, and what speaks to this sort of community analog, is that 44% of this population were arrested 10 or more times over the course of this study. So what does it mean to be arrested 10 times over the course of 5 years? How do you hold a job? How do you hang out with family? How do you make it to the appointment? And the geography of reentry is something that we also have to think through, right? We have to account for this pervasive cycling, right? This cyclical nature of arrest, confinement, and release. These folks are arrested and held anywhere from a few hours to a few days to a few months to many decades, over and over and over and over again. But this happens in very concentrated areas. This is a map of Chicago. In the city of Chicago, half of all inmates who are arrested and released in the state of Illinois are taken from the city itself, Chicago, about 54%. Half of them are returned to or arrested from 6 neighborhoods in the city of Chicago out of 77. New York is the same, $1 million blocks, right? That term is coined here. Detroit is the same. A third of all inmates or closer to 30% of all inmates returning from prisons in Michigan return to 8 zip codes, all within Detroit city limits, despite Detroit furnishing just 7% of the state's total population. And so the question is, what does this mean? What does this cycling do? What does this cycling do? This is a screenshot of the National Inventory of Collateral Consequences of Conviction. I raise this for a reason. This is a tabulation. The American Bar Association curates this website that tabulates the number of collateral consequences of conviction, laws, administrative sanctions, and penalties that bar formerly incarcerated people from all manner of access from all manner of things. And there are 48,000 across the United States. But all politics are local. This is the state of Michigan, where I do my research in Detroit. There's 789 unique laws, administrative sanctions, and regulations that bar formerly incarcerated people from all manner of things, including 350 that target employment, 301 that limit the acquisition of business licenses and property rights. So one response to the employment conundrum that formerly incarcerated people find themselves in is entrepreneurship. But there are 301 that limit acquisition to business licenses and property rights. 120 that limit political and civic participation, meaning which boards one can sit on, in what ways one can form coalitions or groups to change the laws and policies that keep them out of the labor market. 120, one state. 45 that limit their access to housing, which is funny because HUD has just 2 guidelines to bar someone with a criminal record from public housing. No methamphetamine production in their history, and to not be registered as a sex offender. Right? But 45 in this state. But all politics are local. Every one of them. This is Illinois. 1,463, including 586 limiting business licenses and property rights. Read that as entrepreneurship. 556 that target employment. 186 political and civic participation. 54 that constrain family and domestic rights. Whether or not I can adopt or foster a child, whether or not I can be in the same home with my child. 21 that limit access to housing. New York's no different. 1,314. 606 they target employment. 365 to limit acquisition of business licenses and property rights. 147 for participation. 61 to constrain access to one's family. 35 access to housing. So what does this all mean? That prisoner reentry is not just an event, and that these are not just barriers. Prisoner reentry is itself a social institution. Right? If a third of all black men are working age black men, and if 60% of all working age black male high school dropouts can expect to go to prison, then they can expect to come home. And the recidivism studies tell us they can expect to go back, at least to a jail, a detention center, a police station lockup facility. There's very little research on jails. There's next to no research, except for mine, on police station lockup facilities and what happens to folks when they get out. And that's not even published. Right? This is work. Like the family, the labor market, and education, arrest, incarceration, and successive rounds of reentry are normal social processes for poor people. It has changed the nature of social life for the poor, and especially for poor black Americans. But what in the world does this look like? What does it look like? What does it look like on the ground? And so I'd like to introduce you to a man I call Joseph Caldwell. I met Joseph. Joseph is a short, affable African-American man in his mid-40s, whom I met at the Detroit Reentry Center, a correctional facility that offers residential drug treatment and violence prevention services in the city of Detroit. Joseph was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in his late 20s and struggled for 2 decades with a crack and heroin addiction. A mental health technician took him off of his bipolar medication during his prison intake, explaining that he had a drug problem and not a mental illness. Joseph spent 8 years in a Michigan prison without access to drug treatment or counseling before he paroled to the DRC. After doing 6 of his 18 month parole in the DRC in drug treatment, he was released on a condition that he would report to his parole officer for weekly drug tests, regularly attend Narcotics Anonymous group meetings, complete a workforce development training program, and get a job. He's a generally happy guy, but he would break into sullen moods. He would cry during his meetings with his parole officer and would often break into tears during our interview sessions. He talked all the time about wanting to be a better uncle to him. He didn't have any children to his nephews. Fortunately, he had a perceptive parole officer. She was fantastic, who told him to go get a psychiatric evaluation. He was, of course, diagnosed again with bipolar disorder, immediately put back on psychotropic medications, and was ordered to attend counseling sessions twice a month. I meet Joseph at the Rosa Parks Transit Center, the city's main bus terminal, and shadowed him during his first appointment with workforce development. It was February of 2014, and on one of the coldest days of the year. Joseph was underdressed. He wore a black Detroit Tigers jacket and a thin, worn skull cap. The address was just under a mile from the terminal. He was overly concerned with my level of comfort. This surprised me. Cracking jokes while we walked to a family social service center, trying his best to put me at ease, to make me comfortable with him. Because we're walking alone, he doesn't want me to be afraid of him or something like that. He told me no less than 5 times that he appreciated, quote, spending time with a brother like me, and that he was glad to, quote, do something positive. When we got to the address, a monstrosity not far from Midtown, I understood the much deeper way why he went through all those motions. The building was closed. The loose leaf printout taped to the door had addresses for a few, hopefully open workforce development agencies, but the closest one was 9 miles away. Ironically, that center was close to the property Joseph was helping to rehab, the same place he slept that night. He did off-the-books demolition work and cleaned newly rehabbed properties for a real estate developer that used to be his dope dealer. There was no phone number on the printout for the agency we needed to go to. Joseph's phone ran out of minutes. He couldn't have called the number if there was one. The bus card that I typically gave when I did an interview ran out for him. I had interviewed him before. He was counting on a new bus card for me to get around for the week, and the $40 gift card that I passed out as compensation for our interviews to eat and to refill his prepaid phone card. He also thought he could have gotten a bus card from the center if it was open, but of course it wasn't. If I wasn't with Joseph, he would have had to have walked 9 miles to the center or risk missing the appointment. Without the bus card I handed out, he would have had to have walked miles to the parole office for his weekly drug test, to his AA meetings or counseling, or he would have had to have convinced someone he knew with a car to give him a ride. He told me he could be sent back to prison for missing appointments. His fears were not unfounded. Not only did he know men who had been, quote, flogged or sent back to prison for similar reasons. Nearly a quarter of all prison admissions in the last few years were for parole violations. But the price of violations is steep. Inmates who get sent back to prison have to finish the remainder of their time on probation or parole. And Joseph had a full 18 months left. Even if a parole officer didn't think the violation is serious, they could detain you in the city of in Detroit for up to 30 days at the Detroit Detention Center in a unit for parole violators they call the I-drop. They call this laying them down. Joseph's careful work to ensure that I was comfortable with him paid off. We walked back to the bus depot where my car was parked, and I gave him a ride, largely because he needed me to, and also because I was cold, but also because I was convinced he was a nice guy in a bad situation. When we got to the Workforce Development Center, we learned that the training classes were full. He could not participate. There were simply no spaces in the class for him. He was told to put his name on a waiting list and come back next week in case another parolee failed to show up. They did not give out bus cards to people who were not yet in the program, and they could not guarantee him a spot if he did show up the following week. We chatted with the service provider about opportunities available at the center and grabbed brochures on our way out the door. We drove to a Coney Island, a Detroit diner chain near his work site and temporary home to debrief on the day's activities. He thanked me profusely for the $7 lunch that I bought him, for the $40 gift card, and for, quote, being there for him. There were so few places he could turn to for help, and he had to cultivate my trust in order to get help from me. Like the center man, his life moved from one rejection to another. The mental health worker refused him psychiatric care. The social service agency had shut its doors. His only option was nearly impossible to get without help. Without help. Without me, he may not have made the appointments his parole officer required him to go to, but even with my help, the agency had no space and could not accommodate his needs, so he had to explain this to her. This all would have had to have been explained to his parole officer, who may or may not believe him. And without his former dope dealer, someone who his parole officer likely would tell him to avoid, he would have no place to stay. Like Joseph, like the center man, is almost completely at the mercy of others, dependent on the kindness of strangers for food, clothes, shelter, and on the mercy of the police, the courts, or the parole officer so that he can stay out of jail or prison. How might we understand this? How might we understand Joseph's condition? Of course, Nina Simone gives us a wonderful theory. You know? It's the theory of the center man. We can't leave it there. Third-party actors have immense power in the lives of formerly incarcerated people. This is an underanalyzed, unstudied kind of vulnerability, right? Employers, landlords, criminal justice actors and agencies, licensing bodies and government officials, family social service providers, and anyone else they come in contact to is incentivized not to help them. This is a transformed social landscape. It is Baldwin's new catalog of disaster. This fundamentally alters the nature of interactions. This is because every act of kindness is a favor. Me giving him a ride is a favor. It's an act above and beyond what I would be expected to do, or what anyone else would expect to be reasonable, given the fact that Joseph was in prison for 8 years. And not just me, I'm not talking about I'm a good guy. That's not the point of this. Employers are doing favors. Landlords see themselves as doing favors. Therefore, the ex-offender must interact with everyone else they encounter in such a way that they put them at ease. This is not the same thing as stereotype threat. The psychologists in the room are familiar with this. The stereotype threat is when there's this looming idea, the stereotype about your social group, and it harms one's abilities, for example, to perform tasks. In the iconic example, whistling Vivaldi, a black man's walking down the street, is afraid that someone's afraid that they might be afraid of him, right? And decides to whistle Vivaldi to put them at ease. Joseph can't whistle Vivaldi. Joseph's been convicted of a crime. Right? He can't prove that he's not or has not been a bad person. He can only prove that he's, quote, changed his life. That he's, quote, made good, that he's become a good man. Now, it's reasonable for folks to reject him. Again, they incentivize helping put others at risk. A family who lives in public housing, or with any landlord for that matter, even though landlords aren't mandated to, for example, check for a criminal record, they do so because being a good landlord means you keep criminals off your property. And so if a family member allows a formerly incarcerated person to sleep on a couch, they can face eviction. Not to mention the long-term fatigue of caring for a 50-year-old man who can't get a job. Okay? Employers, landlords, and social service agencies are made responsible for the, quote, ex-offender. They're sued if anything happens on their property. Even social service agencies, one of the best ones in the city of Chicago, this organization called St. Leonard's Ministries, got sued because a quote, sex offender, quote, broke out of a halfway, you can't break out of a halfway house, but he escaped from the halfway house, and he raped someone, and rape is terrible. St. Leonard's Ministry got sued for $18 million. So much more than operating money. But the risks are even higher for the formerly incarcerated. They are once made dependent on others, right? But they are the least desirable candidates for help. This is largely unaccounted for vulnerability because an argument with a partner, a girlfriend like Joseph's girlfriend, who was 10 years older than him, whom he did not like very much when I first met him, but he needed a place to stay, right? But an argument with her could equal a bout with street homelessness. A problem with a coworker could equal the loss of a scarce work opportunity, a missed appointment, or even pissing hot, which might include having a drink or smoking some weed, even in a state where weed is legalized, could mean a trip back to prison, or very worse, at the least getting, quote, laid down, 30 days incarcerated at the eye drop. A misunderstanding with the case manager could equal the loss of a job, food, transportation, drug treatment, counseling, or even time with one's family. Social workers have immense power in this way. This is a deep level of vulnerability and dependence. In Joseph's case, he was dependent on me, so he had to shuffle. Right? Those locked out of social, civic, and economic life become dependent in many ways on others. This combination of precarity and derision amplify the stakes of their everyday interactions. This is why I say it has transformed the social world. What does it mean to interact with someone when they have power over you? What sorts of interactions do you have with your boss? And what if everybody was your boss? The good ex-offender, this is not stereotyped. The formerly incarcerated person can't convince the others they're not dangerous because they've been convicted of a crime. They have to therefore take responsibility for their criminality and insist that they have changed their lives. They must prove to others through their actions that they are in fact good people. This is implemented in formal and informal ways. Informally, we saw how this worked with Joseph, how he's responding to state mandates to prove to me that he's a good enough guy so that he can get in my car on a really cold day. And we can understand how one might stay with a partner whom they don't care for, who may be abusive, or they just don't like them, right? Like folks who don't have records or folks who aren't in this position, if we don't like somebody, we can just bounce. I'm out. Put your name on orange juice. I don't like that. I'm gone, right? So we can see the informal. But what about the formal? Formal institutions and organizations cajole, they expect these kinds of performances through standard crime control practices. So I won't read you, I want to read you another vignette. But I must. Because you gotta come with me into this treatment group. You have to see it. But I want to bring you into the reentry service model, and then I'll wrap. Right? To bring you into the reentry service model, we have to understand how reentry programs work, right? They operate on a form of human capital, a model of human capital investment. The idea is to invest enough skills in individuals so they can muscle their way out of poverty. This is an anti-poverty sort of economic community development strategy from Schultz, and then later Gary Becker perfects it, and then we see Heckman and all these folks apply it to the worlds of education. And it works very well with children. It's fantastic with children. We see great outcomes from preschool forward. But this is more than just skills acquisition. Reentry programs expect to, quote, change people's lives. This is from work that I've published elsewhere. But the idea is to focus on a few things. Social skills, sometimes referred to as life skills. Employment readiness training, so getting you ready for the worlds of work, teaching you soft skills that you need, how to look assertive, how to shake a man's hand or a woman's hand or your employer's hand, your boss's hand. but never connecting you with a job, right? Getting you dressed, but never connecting you to the world of work. And then cognitive behavioral therapy programs, alternately labeled things like criminal thinking, thinking for a change, moral reckonance therapy. These are the three most popular therapies for this group. And all of these teach the formerly incarcerated person, the ex-offender, because they are viewed as ostensibly different because our laws and policies make them so. Right? And so this ostensibly different character is taught to reframe how they think about the world. The problem is your perspective. It's not the situation that you face. Drug treatment usually based on CBT. And so in these programs, the good ex-offender, and I'll show you this in a hot second, is expected to give back. So to be a good ex-offender, to do well in these programs, you must embrace this logic of personal transformation and personal development, an entrepreneurial spirit, to embrace this notion of an entrepreneurial self that can muscle your way out of poverty and hardship. You expect to embrace it, but not just embrace it, you also expected to, quote, give back to others, help others, to show that you're good. And so I want to show you this by bringing you with me into one of these programs. So from the moment they arrived, this was a drug treatment program. It was obvious that Julius and Victor had a long history with Emmaus and with each other. Testament to the positive regard residents had for the facilitator, Julius and Victor graduated from programming 2 years earlier. Julius returned frequently to attend outpatient treatment. Staff members described him as a model program graduate. After graduation, he found work at a grocery store and reconnected with his family, moving back in with his wife and 3 teenage daughters. Julius looked young for 49. He was well-dressed, thin with a muscular build, and quite charismatic. Only his missing front teeth betrayed his decades-long struggle with crack and heroin addiction. He hadn't been back to prison since his last bit, a 3-year sentence that got him to the program where I find him. Victor, on the other hand, had trouble since completing the program. He was rearrested while on parole just months after graduation. After short, repeated bits in the county jail, he re-enrolled in programming at Emmaus, the place I call Emmaus Road. Victor was tall with broad shoulders. He wore a distressed plaid shirt, jeans, and work boots. He mostly did manual labor on construction sites like Joseph, but he managed to make enough money to contribute to his family, a wife with 3 teenage kids. He also had an ongoing heroin addiction. His low haircut and gold fillings provide evidence of his class background and age, a well-worn 46. Despite his family, job, and years spent in treatment, Victor frequently relapsed, cycling in and out of jail. Now, Victor and Julius were from the same Puerto Rican neighborhood on Chicago's northwest side, and did time in some of the same facilities. But they first met as residents at Emmaus. This is a residential faith-based treatment program that's based on cognitive behavioral therapy. It's an evidence-based program that has all the social skills, life skills, got all the checklists that I laid out. Those are evidence-based checklists for these programs. They have all of them. Having arrived within a week of each other, they bonded over being 2 of the few Puerto Ricans at the facility. When it was Victor's turn to check in, his report was somewhat defiant. This is what he says. This is during check-in. What'd you do for the weekend? He says, to tell you the truth, I ain't had no good weekend. My girl, she thinks everything's cool. I can't tell I got caught up, meaning high. But that's how it is, you know. We all make mistakes. I'm human. The last time I got caught up, I was sick. This time, I ain't had no excuse. I did what I wanted to do. I was just like, fuck it. I'm just going to keep it real, you know. I fucked up. I'm human. The facilitator, Mr. Harris, interrupts dryly. You're a little too human. Everyone laughed except Julius. As a look of surprise and anger flashed across his face, he turned his folding chair toward his old friend. We all need help, right? I understand that, but you can't walk up in here. What are you saying? That was yesterday. We were on the phone the day before, man. Victor responds, I'm just being real with you. I'm supposed to be able to be me, right? If I can't be honest here, the adage, where can I be honest? Okay. At that point, Uriah chimes in, his demeanor calm, his expression easy. He says, let me ask you this, though, brother. Uriah is another brother who's in the room. You're right, we all been there, and I don't know you, but what do you think you could have done differently? I mean, could you have, though, reached out to one of the brothers? I'm saying, you look at Julius, like, hit him up, hit up Julius. Because I see you with that brother all the time. You know, they're old friends. Julius, at this point, is seething. Looking directly at Victor, his voice high, tense, a bit shaky, he explains, you can't walk up in here all cavalier like I was just using all weekend. You don't know what that does? You're in a room full of addicts. Sam, an African-American man in his late 20s, typically joked to break the ice. His delivery was characteristically muted, his affect nonchalant, when he offered a cautious voice of reason. I struggle with mine too, he said. He paused for a bit, looked over at Victor, cracked a slight smile, saying, I don't even know you, man. He dug through his pocket, pulling out a sheet of paper, and started to write his cell phone down. Here, he said, handed Victor the slip of paper. You may just get one use out that shit. Scanning the group, smirking. That shit might change tomorrow. Everyone laughed, including Julius. After a few seconds, Sam added seriously, you need to talk? Hit me up. I can listen. We could all use someone to listen to. The exercise of confession and correction, what participants call, quote, pulling up, was central to each group's dynamic. The interventions were psychological and dispositional. These exchanges shaped the kinds of interactions that took place in the group, classified participants as particular kinds of group participants, kinds of people, addicts, ex-offenders, and nested those classifications within a broader social system, in this case within the reentry apparatus itself. Reentry programs do not address the barriers that former prisoners face. They can't. But teach them to reinterpret their social circumstances in order to navigate them. That process is relational. It emanates from above, from staff to group participants, but also from below, from participant to participant. From above, Mr. Harris takes a strong yet gentle position in the group. Though he asks few questions, it makes few suggestions. The organization's goal to foster a kind of transformation among the participants was captured in each interaction. From below, group participants are required and police each other's confessions. Julie subjects to Victor's, for example, cavalier attitude. To be successful, quote, successful, to be a good ex-offender, the former prisoner had to display their will to change their lives, engage in a set of interactional practices or group work using I language to acknowledge their faults and their responsibility for the resolution of the situations they face. But to show a level of mastery over these processes, they had to give back to others. We see this when Donnie cracks the joke, when he hands him the paper. We see a push for leadership inside these groups. And the good ex-offenders are the ones that give back, not the ones who are constantly taking. Julius expressed disappointment, right, suggesting that Victor should know better. He should be an advisor, giving back to others through the transformative process, not just someone who confesses their own problems. While confessional practice suggests that the participant is willing to receive mentoring, right, that is, the participant is willing to be changed or transformed, engaging in appropriate helping practices shows a different, more complete level of transformation, what I call a will to transform or the will to help others. Like the will to be transformed, this is also a process of classification. By helping others, by giving back, quote, giving back to others, I position myself, right, as someone who, one, has already changed my life, and two, has attained expertise in change. And finally, that I'm willing and able to help others through their process. The language employed within these groups must be self-referential. The classifications require participants to acknowledge their character flaws. But this moment of giving back and showing leadership in the group, giving back to the community, giving back to group members, is the real key here to show that they have indeed fully changed, fully transformed. But it just doesn't start in the group process itself. It's not just the reentry group. This whole notion of giving back, of the ex-offender having to perform a certain kind of safety for others, that others are safe around them, they're a good guy, this starts in the prison. This is a picture of the Gold Coast in California men's prison colony. These are lifers that perform hospice care. And they talk about this as a lifestyle, this notion of giving back, helping others. We live with these dudes. You've got to care about them, they say. We care for each other. We help out each other, right? But this seems like it could be of one's own volition. I help because I'm a good guy, I'm a do-gooder, I want to be helpful. It's very interesting. I talked to a formerly incarcerated public health activist here in New York City. And we were breaking bread, and I asked him, I was like, how'd you get involved in your activism? He said, man, I always wanted to be a social worker. But he ended up doing public health activism, which he uses slightly different. He says, that's how I started out. I said, how'd you get into that? He said, in prison, this is what he said, if I wanted any growth, if I wanted any stimulation, if I wanted any intellectual stimulation, if I even wanted to get out of the cell, all I could do was be an HIV peer counselor. There was nothing else available to me. So the do-gooder is cajoled into do-gooding through the institution itself, whether that be on purpose or whether that be because other programs have waiting lists, like Joseph when he got to the Workforce Development Center, right? They're being made to give back, just like the sinner man is being made to eventually confess. Giving Giving back extends to the community. This is my dear brother, Yusef Bunchy Shakur. He's an amazing activist in Detroit. He does incredible work. I have his eyes covered like that's going to give him some anonymity. If you just look him up, you'll find him. He does beautiful work. His whole MO is giving back to the community. Right? His whole MO, and not to please others, but this is how activism looks. Activism looks like giving back, helping community. It talks about moving from being a predator to a protector. I've changed my life. So even through activism, this framework holds in really interesting and problematic ways. Reaching the lost, loving each other. Love is so necessary. This emotional labor that's involved in giving back. Providing mentorship. Again, we saw this in the groups, right? Where the mentorship was provided. In one case from Donnie, who cracks his little joke. But this is how people move up to the center. Visible commitments to community improvement. We see formerly incarcerated people doing things to give back, to show that they're human, like everybody else, that they're, quote, returning citizens, right? Like everybody else. So they do things like become violence interrupters, putting their bodies on the line. There's nothing wrong with this. The question is, why do they have to do it? And what does it mean to have to do that? To be considered a fully human member of a human community. Telling one story of personal transformation. This is an interesting example. Shaka Senghor, this is a best-selling book, Righting My Wrongs, Life and Death and Redemption in an American Prison. It's all about redemption, changing his life, transforming his life, so that after he spends his, I forgot what it was, 17 or 18 years locked away from murder, that he can live a normal life. And he can start a business when he gets out. But there's reward. Sometimes this happens. People blow up. He makes it to Oprah. His book's a bestseller after. And even the amazing Glenn Martin, who leads with conviction, the idea is that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. He's absolutely right. Furthest from the resources. He's absolutely right. Why is this the condition? Why is this the expectation? To consider a man like Glenn Martin, who could run any organization, a fully human member of the community. What we see is the emergence of new kinds of masculinities. Not the hyper-masculine that embodies the stereotype or that animates the stereotypes that folks are constantly pushing back against. I am smart. I am human. I care. I have love. But we see the emergence of an emotionally intelligent, intellectually curious, caring, and altruistic form of masculinity, not typically associated with formerly incarcerated people. And so when we think about the research on masculinities, where's this? Here's the point. What we've done through law and policy is we've created an entirely new social category. We've made up the ex-offender. This is more than just discourse, right? It involves action and interaction. So there's a scholar who writes about making up people. His name is Ian Hacking. He's a philosopher of science, and he writes about the making up of the autistic, the making up of the, quote, mad traveler. This is someone who goes in a fugue state. If you all remember Breaking Bad, the character pretended to have gone in a fugue state. This is why I was like manufacturing methamphetamine or something. Anyway, he pretended to like be gone for weeks at a time or something like that. And the construction of genius, for example. He argues that these are new kinds of people, new human kinds. He says there's no universal theory for people making, but there are 5 processes typically: the people, classifications, institutions, experts, and knowledge about them. And we see, if we look at the ex-offender, that there are millions of people who are labeled ex-offender. That the classification is in wide use, that term itself. That there are novel institutions within which they interact. There are reentry programs. There's 48,000 laws and policies. Law is an institution, after all. Family is an institution. We can see how family life and partnerships are altered as a result, uniquely. And there's even stereotypical knowledge about them. We see this in the evidence base. Right? We see a best practices literature and even folk wisdom from formerly incarcerated people themselves and from people who think they know something about reentry, like criminologists and psychologists and social workers and sociologists like me. And even, quote, good ex-offenders themselves who are able to write books, who are able to write training guides and this sort of thing. If reentry is made a new kind of person, and if they have a different relationship with the law, my argument is that what we're looking at is actually not a question of behavior, but this is a question of citizenship, what I call carceral citizenship. We see the emergence of alternate restrictions, 48,000 laws, policies, and sanctions, and then there are laws on top of laws. Conditions of release are not codified law in any state. Not being able to associate, so you get a slip of paper that says what you can and can't do. Don't leave state lines, don't use drugs, you must go to treatment, report to your parole officer, you may not smoke weed. Some of these practices, most of these practices are formally legal practices that are illegal for this group. They have their own laws. Crossing the state line is not illegal for anybody but somebody with a record. Smoking weed in Colorado is not illegal unless you have a record, right? Alternate rights. So the rights thing is an interesting question. Because the rights and the benefits that are associated with what I'm talking about as carceral citizenship are perverse. They're a perverse set of rights and benefits. If we think about California prison realignment, for example. Now you can serve an inmate meal loaf, you can grind all his food up and serve it in a little patty to them. They have to eat or drink as punishment. But that meal loaf has to reach a certain standard of care, or you have subjected them to unnecessary punishment. Now, you can give them the meal loaf, but the meal loaf has to be to a certain standard. And so California prison realignment, the biggest decarceration initiative that's ever happened in the United States, is based on inadequate access by formerly incarcerated people by currently incarcerated people to health care, by overcrowded prison conditions. There is no urban poor population in this country that has a right to health care besides what I'm calling the carceral system. Then, of course, there are counseling services that happen when people get convicted of crimes like child abuse or neglect. So states interpret this as a mandate to ensure that they get psychological services. You might even get housing. If you have a certain risk score when you come out of prison, you're eligible for social services that people who don't have a criminal record are not eligible for. This is perverse. It's a perverse set of benefits, but it's a set of benefits that has to be accounted for. And then finally, alternate responsibilities. The responsibility to give back to others. Again, I think that everyone I named in this project, from Joseph to Glenn Martin, who are incredible people, amazing people. My question is, what does it mean to force people to give back, to be treated as fully human parts of a human community? To convincing others that one is good, to eventually doing good works. These are alternate responsibilities like taxes. So, to close, we live in strange and marvelous times. Yeah? Something to ponder here is that if we were to release every prisoner today, we would still live in a supervised society. The question for us is, what kind of society do we really want to live in? Thank you. Q&A? Should I do Q&A? Q&A.
So what do you think should happen?
So I think that I'm going to answer that question by first saying what should not happen. Mm-hmm. I think what should not happen is what we're currently doing, which is an overemphasis on behavior and crime. We have to break out of this sort of crime and punishment box. Because my entire argument is that this is a problem of citizenship. Mm-hmm. And so then, now the question becomes, what kinds of ways might I intervene at the level of citizenship? So I might not do another cognitive behavioral therapy program. No, people need it. And I'm also not saying that people don't need CBT, or they don't need therapy, they don't need counseling, they don't need job skills and work skills. They're not formally already excluded from the labor market. They don't need to be shored up and all that. But we do that exclusively. And so the question is, what might an intervention that takes this notion of citizenship seriously look like? And it might look like the New York's Human Rights Commission's Fair Chance Act. That, here's my vulgar interpretation of what that is. It's a vulgar interpretation because I'm not an attorney and I'm not digging into their files in the ways in which I'd like to. I'm just getting started to get my head around what they do. But it seems to me that what they've suggested is that every person in the city of New York there should be a uniform process in place to deny each person in the city of New York employment. So if you're going to be denied employment, you should be denied employment for the same reason everybody else is. If your criminal conviction is the reason you're denied employment because there's some state law that supersedes it, you have to do something called, I think it's Article 23 review or something like that, where they have to justify why, which law, under what circumstance that particular offense mattered for the job at hand, and this kind of thing. That's intervention at the level of citizenship. Something that we could do also at the level of citizenship is ask ourselves a question. One, do we want this? I don't think we want this. And two, on the 48,000 laws, policies, administrative sanctions, do we need 48,000 laws, policies, and administrative sanctions? We're in a conservative moment in our government, right? At the federal level. A moment of widespread deregulation. Should this not be one of the things we think about deregulating? You know? Is it useful to have 1,400 laws, penalties, and administrative sanctions in the state of Illinois? Over 1,000 in New York. So these are things these are questions that we could take up if we're thinking about this. And then we have another set of questions as well. Well, what kinds of things do citizens have rights to? And from there, we might shape recommendations.
So you suggest that those that are close to the problem are sort of best equipped to make changes and deal with it, right? But those are also people that tend to be more disenfranchised. Like if you have a felony conviction, you often cannot vote in many states, or you don't have as much access to jobs and money and stuff like that. So how do you recommend, or what are some actions? Or
Yeah, absolutely. So I firmly believe in the work of formerly incarcerated activists in the same way that I believe in the work of anybody who's directly affected by an issue. I think that slogan is brilliant. I think the movement that they formed is a stroke of genius. If you look, for example, at the Close Rikers campaign, the mayor of New York, who was not on board, is on board. The governor is on board. You got treasurer, city kind of, there's a plan, 10 years, this kind of thing. Okay, and so what Glenn Martin does, and what Just Leadership USA does, and being a commercial for them in some ways, but what they do is they do a lot of capacity building work where they equip formerly incarcerated leaders with deeper skill sets to do their leadership on a larger scale or grander scale, because the things that they're addressing is so varied. So they're acting in some ways as a hub for a national network of leaders. So some folks are doing bail reform, some folks are doing welfare law reform. So there's a brilliant woman out of California, Susan Burton, who's got a book that's going to come out shortly called Becoming Miss Burton. She's incredible. She worked to get many laws changed in the state of California, like being denied access to welfare benefits, this kind of thing. So the reason why people who are close to it are so useful in the solution is not because they have some essentialized, deep, natural understanding, it's because they've been through a certain set of circumstances. And one way around the problems of disenfranchisement is enfranchisement, a kind of radical enfranchisement that I think organizations like that do. But there's also a problem here, not with the organization, but with assumptions about groups that we have to be careful of. And which is why I talked about essentializing. We don't want to treat formerly incarcerated people like urban ethnographers treat black people or Puerto Ricans or Laotians or the Mau and the tribes that they go to, which is there's something natural about them, there's something essential about them, they're different, they're alien, they're so far removed from me, and then we make assumptions about the things that they need. The essentialization of that group is why we have the policies that we have. We think that they're dangerous. You see what I'm saying? And so in some ways, we're in a bit of a knot here, where on the one hand, we want to feature the work of people who have been through the system, highlight that, and suggest that this is a way to go. But we have to always be mindful that we're not repeating the same sort of stereotypes about that group, just making the people who do good as good people and everybody else as bad people. This is why I like and appreciate the work of Just Leadership USA, because they focus on things like, for example, violence. So we've made good ex-offender categories out of nonviolent criminals, which is less than half of the prison population. Anyway, so you raise a great point. I think the way to do that is through radical enfranchisement. right? Initiatives to bolster skills and all that, but also to connect them with resources. So if formerly incarcerated people have a problem with homelessness and with housing, we might want to push HUD in our cities to give us an explanation as to why, based on these two guidelines, they have all these restrictions. That might be a moment of intervention. That might change the lives of many, many, many people.
I mean, thinking about the kind of society we want.
Sorry, could you speak into the mic? We have like 10 people on the live stream right now. And, yeah. Thank you.
In terms of the society we might all want to live in, is there anything positive we could take from the experience of the carceral citizen and maybe apply it to all citizens so that everyone could be giving back in some way?
Yeah, so, yes, yeah, absolutely. So you know, I'm a do-gooder. I teach in a school of social work. I'm all about doing good. You know, like I'm down with helping people and stuff like that. I just want to be careful. Because what I'm suggesting is that we're expecting something from this group that we don't expect from anyone else. And this is part and parcel of the problem. And I think that just like John Henryism or something like that, like there's, you know, the idea that folks are expected to do twice as much, you know, as others, is, you know, a stereotype about black folks. They feel that, they wear that, and this tears them up, right? It kills them, literally kills them, right? Their life expectancy is lower. They have negative psychological effects, negative health effects, and stuff like that. I think there's some of that likely happening among this group. I think some of that might explain, this may be a mechanism that explains, you know, their negative mortality rates. This is a really fascinating study. It was a simulation study based on prisoners in New York State and using life tables to do the analysis that came from Evelyn Patterson that found that for every year a prisoner spent in New York State, they lost 2 years on their life course. Now some of that is the prison is terrible. Some of that is that we treat them like cinnamon, right? There's no place for them to go. We expect them to perform a certain obeisance, right? And that weighs on you. That weighs on you. And so I'd be careful about that. Now, having said that, there's some really wonderful work that's happening among this group that would happen among any group of oppressed people. Right? So if we look among groups of oppressed people, we see folks saying, we're oppressed. How are we oppressed? Let's band together. Let's grab some allies, and let's make change happen. So organizations like Just Leadership USA, organizations like Force in Chicago, these are places to watch, I think, that are creatively pushing not just our thinking about the lives and experiences of these folks, but different ways to intervene sort of in the social world. So can we learn something from that? Absolutely. Absolutely. But we just have to keep in mind that this is happening because we have written laws that say a man can't spend time with his kid, or a woman can't spend time with her child, or you know, someone who's other identified can't participate in the labor market or the workforce. And I think this is an important part to remember. Yeah, thank you for the question.
I guess I was wondering if you have done any analysis or thinking around regional differences around carceral citizenship, similarities, differences. Obviously, it's not one group of people, right?
Yeah,
and so, have you had any of that in your analysis or plan to do anything?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So part of what I did in Detroit, which I didn't have the occasion to talk about here, was compare groups by age in the same city. So the experiences of someone between 18 and 25 and compare them with someone over 40 because of accelerated aging in the prison. Because the group dies so early, we have to think about their developmental milestones in different ways. And I found vast differences in the sets of relationships they were able to form and maintain over life. And of course, this has to do with aging and what happens with people at different stages of life course. But the experiences are very different. Someone who's 50, for example, has a different set of problems that they face due to a few things that have to do with their age, their body's slowing down. Sickness is different among this population than, say, someone who's strapping and 25 and young, right? So you've got sickness and disease and those sorts of things, like physiological problems and also physiological differences, what kinds of work one might take. And then you've also got labor market discrimination that hits when you're 50. So many people who are 50 have a terrible time finding work because folks are looking for the 25-year-old. Right? And so it's in the same way. The kinds of labor that's available to this, which is a restricted array of labor arrangements are available to this group. Among those, most of that are things like under the table work, demolition. You don't want a 65-year-old man or woman, whoever doing demolition. A lot of service work, which requires charisma. So if we think about differences among the group, there are some differences to think about, like the extent to which they're considered charismatic, beautiful. The bright and shiny folks who are able to publicly speak, for example. And I don't mean bright, shiny, and the shiny, being derisive. I mean that I'm calling that out ironically. That public speaking is one of the primary ways to make money if you have a record. And what does it take for someone to listen to you? You have to be articulate, right? So you saw, I think, like there's a sort of negative racist connotation to that, but you have to be articulate. You have to be able to publicly speak. Everybody can't publicly speak. You have to be well read. You have to be attractive in many cases. Or you got to be able to tell a really good story. And so again, there's great variation within the group, and then there's also variation within the group in regards to what kinds of criminal records they have, even if you look within the same city. So someone who's convicted of a sex offense, forget it. Forget it. Someone who's convicted of murder, a little better off than the person who's convicted of a sex offense, but it's a little harder than the dude convicted of a drug crime. Even though there are different policies that have to do with the regulation of vice as it relates to drugs. Right? A woman who's got a history of prostitution, or something like that. Right? A very different set of experiences from a woman who, went down for, there's this isn't to diminish this category, but there's among progressive circles a valorization of women who are responding to domestic violence by killing their partner, right? And so that group becomes a hero. That's a heroic act. I understand that completely. I'm not diminishing that in any way. But I'm saying that that's the group that we look at. So how then do we treat someone who doesn't have such a heroic circumstance, somebody who just made some mistakes? And so the treatment of others varies in many ways based on what they did. And then when you think about regional, that's within region. If you think about regional, Detroit's vastly different from Chicago, vastly different from New York City. What happens on the west side is very different in Chicago than what happens on the south side. What happens in the 6 neighborhoods, there's an overwhelming concentration of social services in those neighborhoods because they're, quote, scratching an itch. To someone who returns to a neighborhood that's outside those zones, right? So it raises important questions about, like, the relationship to poverty. That relationship is contingent. I could be incredibly poor in a middle-class neighborhood and be worse off living in a middle-class neighborhood than I am in the poorest neighborhood in the city of Chicago because there are more resources in the poor neighborhood because it's where they place them.
So you used just leadership as an example of a model that's doing this well, right? So how do you talk to the organization that isn't as shiny as just leadership? What do you say to them?
Yeah, I have a soft spot in my heart for prisoner reentry programs and organizations because I think that many of them are doing the best they can with very limited resources. They have the problem that just leadership is trying to address within their group. They have the problem that, I'll give you an example of building college. Interesting. This is not bright and shiny. Yusef Shakur, who I hope is listening on Facebook Live, is an amazing actor. I'm not just saying that because he might be listening, but I think he does incredible work. And he doesn't have the institutional support that an organization like Just Leadership has. First of all, he's an individual. He's not a fully fleshed out company. But what he does is a lot of, like, fundraising hand to hand. He did this giant book bag drive. I was on the ride with him. We stopped block to block, apartment to apartment, with people handing him things. Folding chairs to put out for the giant book bag drive, food, plates of food, $20 here, $20 there. And it was this beautiful kind of community model that we saw in the 60s and 70s. It was very interesting. So the different ways to skin the cat. And he does political education, so he's not just a book bag drop. So he gets the kids in, he does his political education, teaches them about community development, real estate development, like what happens in the community, how what voice you can have, how you can craft that voice, their own history, the history of movements, how to connect with movements, how to engage in movements, how to build power. Like, he does this very interesting work. He's building a community center in the Zone 8 neighborhood on the west side of Detroit. He's an amazing figure, and the folks that work with him. There are many ways to do it. So organizations that aren't doing this so well, there are many models. And so what I've tried to do is I've tried to push, when I give a similar, less theoretically sophisticated talk to service providers, a more practical way. And I try to talk to them about moving away from just behavioral metrics, for example, and to think about what one must do so that someone can thrive, to reorient the way in which they approach programming from the beginning. And so some people will do it through services, some people will do it through community action and organizing, some people will do it through leveraging Congress or something like that. And all of it's beautiful, 1,000 roses, 1,000 flowers all blooming together. I'm a firm believer in that. And wherever they are, the idea is, how might I best support one's thriving as a fully human participant within a human community?
Question, but you talk about just leadership, and there's plenty of other examples here in New York of people who come home from prison and taking extraordinary leadership roles.
Yes.
Like the chair. But it didn't happen in Detroit, which, or even in Chicago. Why in New York? I know you've been studying people who come home from real leaders, but is there something about Detroit where it's not happening to the same extent?
But it is, but it's not as public. It's not as so you're right. It's not as well funded because New York City is a city full of foundations, and donors, like deep pockets, and also it's a population hub, a population center. It's got extremely progressive politics. Compare it to other big cities. For example, the Human Rights Commission, which has been around for the last, 50 years or something like that. That doesn't exist in the same way in other cities. In the city of Chicago, for example, there's an ethics council. There's no human rights. Right? Even the framework in this city is different. And so it's unsurprising to see rock stars, for example, emerge from a city like New York, and that their efforts to be widely publicized and super well funded. That in some ways for me is unsurprising because the city has this. I mean, my work has thrived being here for 1 year in this city. Right? Like it's one of those places. Like if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. As Jay-Z, New York. Right? That's right. You know, that's absolutely right. There's something about that. But there is action at the community level that's beautiful and interesting and fascinating. And I try to catalog a lot of those activities in my book. There's a wonderful organization out of Ypsilanti, Michigan called The Nation Outside. And so folks in New York won't have heard of The Nation Outside. I hope they do now, but especially the 10 people on Facebook Live. If you broadcast this to 10 more, then maybe you got 20 who here. But the Nation Outside is a bunch of formerly incarcerated leaders who have gotten together to push for criminal justice reform, and they've gotten together with other organizations, with trying to get money from foundations, but it's harder. Then there's also sort of the university uptake. So here, the Center for Justice, you know, it's the university analog in a city that's less progressive with different kinds of politics isn't quite the same. But we're trying to fix that at the University of Chicago, right? With my hire, with the hire of other folks. And so if the resources are there, we begin to see a spotlight on the community action that's lovely that happens. There's a last point to this. I know I answered questions long, but there's a great organization called Forest in Chicago, which was started by our dear friend Eddie Bocanegra and his colleagues, fighting to overcome records to create equality. And what they did was they started organizing on college campuses to change law around expungible offenses, employers with diversity statements, for example, to push them to consider formerly incarcerated people. And they got legislation passed several times in the state of Illinois. But for some reason, that doesn't become a national story. In the state of Illinois, it's deadlocked, political gridlock. You know, we've got very different political orientation from our governor, they're from the House Speaker, they're from, and then Chicago's machine politics. But they were able to get legislation passed 2 or 3 times now over the last, say, 7 years. It's amazing. Yeah.
With religious institutions being on like every other block, what can we do to organize with these institutions to support the reentry process?
Yeah, oh, it's fantastic. So, I started the talk with James Baldwin, who was a preacher, right? He was a preacher till he was like 19 or 16, something like that. And then Nina Simone and Son Cinnamon, because this notion of sin and debt, guilt, animates, I think, criminal justice policy in some really interesting ways. And, we need to have, I'll return and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about like sin and how it's, but this is part of the problem. Part of the wedge is what theologians talk about as duality. But when they talk about duality, they mean separation from, like this separation between sort of from groups, spirit and flesh, sin, and the sinner and the person, the divine, the universal or the divine philosophically, and the material or the corruptible, the body, the flesh. And so this gets born in really interesting ways in some religious institutions. So some religious institutions where that as you've done the crime, you pay the time. And so we've seen that among religious institutions during the get tough on crime era. I've been involved in the Black church for years. I was a volunteer chaplain when I started this work. I'm a religious guy, and you hear a lot of discussion, particularly in my family's Pentecostal tradition, particularly from that tradition, about sin, the wage of sin is death, and these things. And so people get their just desserts. And so the work is to convince folks who have that kind of orientation about the inconsistency in treating folks poorly. And once you get those folks on board, then the churches become wonderful hubs for organizing. A great example of this would be, I think that doesn't go nearly far enough. Would be like, for example, prison ministries is the largest volunteer group in any jail or prison in any state across the nation on the prison ministries. But from prison ministry to community activism, like this is to pushing for policy change, to push, and so we have to convince folks that those people who you're visiting, the sick and folks who are in prison, aren't only there because they're bad people. There are laws and policies that are in the way that are making it easier for certain kinds of behaviors to take place, of course, on some level. But on another, there's a real moral question that churches are well equipped to answer, which is, how much punishment is enough? At what point to stop? And once you get somebody on board like that, then you start seeing like wonderful work. So even in like storefront Pentecostal churches, I often see it over the last few years, formerly incarcerated people who are able to sort of take part in the church, that are leading efforts, that have good relationships with the leadership, and that are able to use those bases as places to mobilize. So I think they're ripe for mobilization, but there has to be a conversation about how and why people get incarcerated, what this means, and what we do next. I think once we have that, then we'll see more. We'll see more mobilization. That's why I appreciate Michelle Alexander, for example, is now at Union Theological Seminary. That's an important moment. That's an important move. And so I'm curious to see what will happen, especially around progressive religious organizations as a result of that. Thank you.
Reuben will be back again on Tuesday.